Those online, those here in the group. It's good to see everybody on this beautiful, beautiful day. So we have this interesting way this time of year, it's supposedly the Sunday before October 31st is kind of the Reformation / All Saints Day, because All Saints Day is on the 1st of November. That's what caused Reformation on the 31st. With All Hallows Eve, but this year I did the one last week, and then thought, well, it's that close, so let's do All Saints Day and give it its own day. It's basically Martin Luther, who was he was a professor at Wittenberg. He's Catholic. He's a part of this. He has his 95 questions, discussion points, theses, as we call them, 95. Like, wow. And so what you do is you go and you kind of put these discussion points up on the door of the church. That way you get people to have the discussion. He thought he was going to have a discussion about kind of indulgences, that not that they should do away with them, but that they were overcharging. And that, so he just wants to have these discussions, and that turns into 95 questions. And so what better time to get a crowd than All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day. All Saints Day is the November 1st. What they did was basically martyrs got their day of remembrance. If you are martyred, which is the Greek word for witness, the greatest witness there is that you give your life for your faith. So if you were martyred, people would remember you on that day. But then, there got to be too many. There was more than 365 days. So they just, it's kind of like President's Day. There's, you just, instead of having one for all of them, you just cram it all into one day and have President's Day. Or Memorial Day. You just don't remember each one. You just, So that's what they did. All Saints Day. So you remember those martyrs who went before us long before, and now all these years later, we really don't in the Presbyterian Church look towards martyrs. In that way, we think it's amazing to give your life for your faith, but what we've kind of changed it or transitioned it to is much more to think about those people who have gone before us, who brought us to where we are. Think about those people in the faith. And in a church like this one that has some substantial history to it, 1751, that's a long time. So there were a lot of people that sat here, and the 4 different locations, and I can point them out, but that kind of brought us to where we are. That it's still going, and think about that, and you think about. All the thousands of churches that go out of business every day now because of location or whatever reason, and that there might be that you still sustain to this point, but then it's also kind of brought back to an individualistic kind of notion as well, or at least that's the way I look at it, is you think about those people who help bring you to this point in your faith too. That's just a really neat day to go, wow, think about those people who taught me Sunday school when I was a kid. I always tell y'all this, we had the flannel board, and we had the little packets, and you'd pull the little figures out and you'd stick them up on the flannel board, and you'd tell the Bible story, and I can remember Miss Pat and Miss Elaine teaching me all through those years, and just consistently, I just remember, I'm sure that they had Sundays where they weren't there or Sundays I wasn't there, but I just remember them there all the time. And so when I drive by that church on Corbin Street, where I had Sunday school, I go, wow, I remember, right up there in that room or down there was, that's where they taught me these stories over and over. And I can't tell you where either one of those folks are now, but or if they haven't passed on, or others, but those are the people that helped bring me to the faith. And so then we have this turn to, I think, is that we have to think about who we are in that story for those who come after us. So what is it that we're doing that, hey, you can come on in. We're having fun. No, you're fine. All is well. That then we think about going forward what, I hate to use the word obligation, but maybe our commitment to our faith that we go, who is it that's coming after us? You know, and that what are we doing to make sure that there's some sense of faith that plays in for them too. And that's a sense of responsibility. I think that's amazing. And that comes into play too when we think a little bit about what the passage today, okay? Which I'm sure that Phil has already read, and which is super good. And yeah, yeah, so you've read around it too, so that helps the discussion as well. We did. The lectionary has jumped because we're running out of time, basically at this point in the year, as you probably already feel that already. As I came home last night after playing, and there's a Christmas tree in my foyer. So well. We are here. Here we are. I didn't say there was a problem. So I was like, well, here we go. So the end of the year kind of starts speeding up now. And so we have to get and also keep this in mind too, as far as our story, as far as the church calendar year, chapter 11 is, remember what chapter 11 is, that's the entrance into Jerusalem for the very first time. So we've already covered that chapter. So we were in chapter 10, but Easter and Lent is where we jump to chapter 11, and then we kind of go backwards to cover the ordinary time. And so we went from chapter 10, we've jumped to chapter 12. And so that keeps us in mind too, that this chapter, all these teachings that Jesus is going through are in the last week of his life. So keep that in mind as well. It's hard to separate that part out. Okay? Okay, 28 through 34. Here we go. One of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. We'll get to that in a second. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, which commandment is the first of all? And Jesus answered, the first is, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And then the scribe said to him, you are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and besides him there is no other. And to love him with all the heart and with all the understanding and with all the strength. And to love one's neighbor as oneself. This is much more important than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he had answered him wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. After that, no one dared to ask him any question. Familiar? Very, right? Yeah, we get this one every year. It comes up in all three, the three synoptic gospels. And how many times? I tried to think about it this week, how many times I've preached this one. I have no idea. Bunch. Okay. And I did look over this morning, and my Bible got references in the margin, which is really good. I looked through some of those. But the thing is, what motivated the scribe to approach Jesus? Great question. Okay, so and so we do what Phil does. We read to the previous section, right? So he's in a conversation with the Sadducees then. Remember, Sadducees were the highest, they were the highest group of scholars or elite, and they only held to the first 5 books of the Bible that we call the Bible as it. They were like, nothing else gets added to the first 5 books. That's it. Nothing else. This is the only thing that matters. Okay? And remember, too, at that point in time, what we call the Old Testament wasn't set in stone. That wasn't until 60 years after Jesus at the Council of Jamnia. Like, no. Yeah, right. Some were, but not the Sadducees. Yeah, the Sadducees were like, yeah, it wasn't a canon, complete book, order through Amazon. Yes, those were the books of Moses, and that's all the Sadducees wanted to talk about. So they're in an argument with him about resurrection because they don't believe in resurrection. They believe this is it. Be good, boom. And so they've just had this discussion, and this scribe, who is basically a scribe, is kind of a legal scholar, a biblical. He's not like a lawyer like we know lawyers today, but the law, the Jewish law. So they were people who were they were kind of in the know. Maybe they wore robes with stoles and stripes on their, I don't know. But they were looked at too as somebody who was a religious thinker. And so he hears their discussion and goes, wow, this guy's pretty smart. I'm going to have a discussion with him. And I'm going to ask him, because it is a discussion point, what is the most important? I mean, they didn't have it down, what they felt was the most important. So it would be open to your interpretation, right? Maybe this is the one that most people fell on, but it's not totally important. I mean, it's not totally settled. Yeah. Right, yeah, you could have picked some other things if you wanted. It's funny, every time we do confirmation class, the one thing that the elders hear over and over and over again from everyone, from me, is or if you've been in a class with me, is every one of them says, the Trinity, God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so you go, so you know what's important to me? Trinity. Hopefully the kids pick up on that, but I mean, you learn, okay, this is it. So yeah, you're right, because in their understanding, they were a monotheistic, that's where the Christian faith kind of changes or veers or, from the Jewish tradition. And in their day, and in the day of which that comes, Deuteronomy 6:4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. That would have been very different from most of the other faiths around them, because they were polytheistic. I've found my spot, haven't I? I'm just creaking away up here. It's not my knees this time. So being monotheistic back then would have been that would have been divergent from the people around them. So that would have been a major standpoint.
Matthew doesn't, in the margin, Matthew, Deuteronomy quoted what you just said. Matthew didn't touch it all on the second part.
Yeah.
Love thy God with all thy mind, soul, and soul. But he didn't address there's only one Lord.
Right.
It's significant to me that
Interesting. Yeah. Have to think about that. Yeah. I think this is great. You folks are learning you're jumping on these other things. This is really good. I love this. So much fun. Huh? Yeah. Okay. So here, what they call the Shema, which is Hebrew for hearing, hear. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. And then what he goes on to say in Deuteronomy 6:4 is this is what you teach to your kids. And you teach it over, and you teach it over, and you teach it over and over again. And then when you finish teaching it, you know what you do? You teach it again. You say this over and over. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your strength. Well, Jesus throws in mind. Jesus throws in mind. Is that right? He adds the one. Okay? But then he doesn't stop there. Then he goes over to Leviticus 19, verse 8, and says, love your neighbor as yourself. And then funny thing, right? Let's see, verse 31, verse 32, no. Verse 31. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. So the guy's only asking for one, and Jesus goes, yeah, I can't stop with one. Typical preacher. But so why do you think he does that?
Well, somewhere I read in here where it said, in one of the scriptures, the passage said, and love thy neighbor as thyself, and that would cover anything that I haven't mentioned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are pretty big, right? What?
Still goes to love one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
it's that simple, but that hard.
Yeah.
But if you truly love others as you love yourself,
Uh-huh.
think about how
Say it. Go ahead. Say it out loud.
self-preservation we all have.
Uh-huh.
If you truly love others the way you love yourself, then this is going to be a much better place to live.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's that easy.
Yeah, that's it. There you go. It's simple. Okay. I think two things. I think you're right. I mean, to love our neighbors ourselves. It also means, too, in that which that we do have to have some sense of appreciation, which people, if there is a person that we can be most despised about sometime, though, is ourselves, right? And so I think there is this notion that we do have to have some sense of healthy appreciation for who we are. And number two, I think that Jesus sees these two together because it's easy to say, I love God. I love God. That's kind of, but when he attaches these two, we can't say we love God except that it's played out in how we express that to each other, because we are all imago Dei and made in the image of God. So that's why I don't think he's willing to pull these two apart, although they're in two different places. And whoever reads Leviticus, has anybody read Leviticus? I've read Leviticus because I have to read Leviticus because it was a part of the program. But you sit around and think, how many of y'all read Leviticus? You read some of the laws in Leviticus and you go, ooh, that's weird. That is just totally weird. I mean, they're just weird, okay?
If you say out loud you love God, he can't say back, no, you don't.
Yeah, right.
So nobody can prove you wrong.
Right. And it's really easy to say, we love you, God. It is. But when he connects these two together, and then that does make real that notion of the imago Dei, that we are made in the image of God. And that suddenly how we start interacting with each other makes things a little more real, complicated, whatever. Interesting. Okay. Let me check my time. And also I think that it comes into play too, that in this first part of this, when we're here on this notion of All Saints' Day, that we've been taught the faith, we're thinking about how we teach the faith, and what does Deuteronomy 6:4 tell us? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. Love God with everything you've got, and pass this on. And keep passing it on. Okay? Or we are. I mean, the interesting struggle when we talk about all that, well, we are in the part now where, what does this passage mean for us today, too, because we're at 20 after? No, that's it. It's a good transition. But how is it that this plays out for us, and that church attendance is, there's probably a host of reasons why we have that. I mean, we set the Lord's Day as the day that we will worship, but okay, in all honesty, who said 11 o'clock was, I mean, is that like maybe that's in Leviticus and nobody's read. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, and so that's whoa, settle down here. Yeah, whoa. I know, yeah, right. Well, I think some of that some of the Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night was much more of a construct of the culture of the U.S. that people got together on Wednesday nights in a church setting because they were agrarian. It just gave them a chance to be together with other people. You know, now we fight like crazy to be with other people but not be with them. You know, it's like, yeah, I'm going to say it. You know, so I think that's part of that. But right, yeah, maybe so, yeah. But it's also too in our culture today. I will just tell you that from this position, no matter what I put down as far as a time for anything, somebody's going to tell me it's bad time for their family, and then if I change it to their time, then it'll be bad for somebody else, or it'll be bad for them again. That sometimes it's just about priorities, and I can't say it any other way. Also, I think that if this is our message, y'all, this is our message, and I think that's what Jesus is trying to say to him too, and the scribe does too. That if we distill all the commandments down, I mean, think about the ones about, you know, honor your father and mother, don't commit adultery, don't kill each other, don't want each other's stuff. Yeah, don't steal each other's stuff. You know, when it comes down to love God, and that's displayed out by how you love each other. I mean, as you love yourself, if you really do those things, do you really want to hurt someone by committing adultery? Do you really want to hurt someone by, and then remembering what Jesus does to those two? He doesn't just go, yeah, adultery is when you think it, and murder is when you call people names. So he raises the bar. So that if we really play out those things, all these other things do take care of themselves. And this is our message, and I've just been thinking about that's pretty much the issue here, and you're going to hear that in the sermon today. That this is our redundant message, and I think sometimes that we just get tired of saying it, and we get tired of hearing it because it's okay. I'm going to hear about love and God, and in our culture, we like, yeah, and so we don't really have what other message do we have here? I don't have Bitcoin. Uh-huh.
Only 2 people.
Right.
Our first church
Uh-huh.
in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, the culture, they haven't heard the first 2 commandments
Yeah.
preached to them enough.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
they're not very welcoming.
Mhm.
They weren't welcoming.
Okay. Well, think about that today when we pass the peace, okay? Ooh. Think on Wednesday nights too. Think about it when we interact with people on Wednesday night. Think about it when we're standing out here. Instead of putting it off on other people or other churches, think about when I come out and I stand that people are in circles. And we are friendly church because churches are friendly. That's what we tell ourselves. But we tend to be friendly to the people we're friendly to. Yeah. So we think about that. So mission is today, everybody, your homework, is try to greet one person you don't greet.
But first of all, you have to have a way to go.
Okay.
How are you? I don't know you.
Yeah.
Oh, I've been going here for 3 years.
Okay, take the chance.
It's okay.
I know, it's just like, hey, I've been blistered with that one before. Like I've been coming, I was a member here long before you were pastor. Well, I don't know that. I'm sorry. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's a part of it. But it also plays out into how we interact. Do we actually think about other people as Imago Dei, image of God? And that's a rhetorical question on one level for y'all, but it's also from me. And that how is it that we understand and knowing full well in the middle of confrontation with someone else when it's not cool, when life is ugly or whatever, it's hard to see someone else as Imago Dei. Right? Farthest thing from our mind, actually. But that's what Jesus is calling us to as people of faith, that he's not saying, hey, this is so much fun, or this is for everybody, or he's saying, this is for us. And the guy asked, what do you think is the most important? I think this is the best. This is it. And the guy tells him he's good. I think you're right, Jesus. It's more important than burnt offerings and the like. And then verse 34, this is not a confrontation with this scribe. We tend to think of scribes as people or Pharisees or the like, always they're always just trying to pull something on Jesus. He was a scribe he says he was a scribe, so he's a legal guy. But then when Jesus saw his answer, he answered wisely. He said to him, you're not far from the kingdom of heaven. You're not far from the kingdom of heaven. Yeah, well, and the notion is that the kingdom of heaven is the place, the time, or the space around us where God's grace is in the moment.
Pastor, do you think the scribe, though, this is my question, do you think, motivation, okay, but when he gets to the last part of the scripture, do you think that did he believe what he said going into it?
Yeah.
Did he believe after?
I think he felt like my take on this passage is that he overhears him duking it out with the Sadducees. And he thinks, well, this guy's got something going on. Which is Mark's thing throughout Mark's gospel. Who is this who has authority? He has authority like we ain't never heard before. Who is this guy? And here he's showing up. Jesus says, this guy's a pretty good teacher. And so this scribe says, you're right. This is the most important thing. He's agreeing with him. And then Jesus goes, you're not far off from the kingdom of heaven. That means, you're right around it all the time. You're aware of it. So I think he's, at least in this moment, he's like, you're good, Jesus.
There was no name, but he's definitely one of those
He's definitely, yeah,
the testimony just
right,
he gave me the
yeah,
scripture.
right. And notice that saint, great, well, this is where we're going to end. We'll end with this one because it's 10:30. Saint, the notion is a holy one. And as I've told you, when we think of that, I always think of stained glass. I think of saints, or when I walk into Duke Chapel, I look down and there they are. They're up there. And I'm never going to get to be one of those because, you know, you got to be pretty high honor. But then I think about 1 Corinthians, this messy, messy, goofy church where they were so problematic if you read 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. He calls them saints. You saints of God in chapter 1, first three verses. He calls them saints. But then when you read the rest of the chapter, you go, ooh, this church is a wreck. And so the notion is that we're all called holy. We're all saints because we're in the grace of Christ. And so that should help us and call us to think about what it is our responsibility as being those people, to live this out and to live it out for those who are going to come after us. Yeah. And what does it call us to be? And then when we sit and bemoan, oh, the church is falling apart, there's not going to be people come out, we go, what am I going to do? How am I going to be? What am I thinking? How am I going to live? And that's where we're called to be. Okay? All righty, let's pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for scriptures like this one that we can really have conversation about, no matter how many times we've heard it over and over and over. But that is our call. Love you with everything we've got. Love our neighbor as ourselves. And we can't separate those two things out. Help us to live in the tension. In your name we pray.